I will tell you that every time I've brought in a professional into the classroom, whether it's in person or on Zoom, and this professional is honest with them, they love that. They're not looking for polished, they're looking for authenticity.
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vella Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vella Williamson.
Hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vella Williamson. This season, our focus is on value and advice and taking action. Today, I'm joined by Komal Kapoor, Ph.D. Dr. Kapoor is a public relations professor at Pepperdine University and the founder of SpeakerPost, a platform that connects educators with industry professionals for guest speaking opportunities in high school and college classrooms. With a background spanning global marketing, media, and entrepreneurship, her work focuses on mentorship, relationship building, and helping students feel more confident and prepared as they enter professional environments. Welcome, Dr. K.
Hi, Melissa. How are you?
I'm doing so great. I'm so happy to connect with you on my podcast and introduce you to our listeners. Tell us all about your background and your professional focus today.
Sure. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I was born and raised in India, and I moved to the US in my 20s for school, for my master's, then for my PhD. And then after that, instead of moving into teaching, I moved to New York to work in media and marketing, living my dream on Madison Avenue. But about 10 years ago, I realized, that I just wanted my work to feel a little more meaningful and more connected. And so that's when I moved to Los Angeles and I shifted to academia at that time. So really, Melissa, I've always just lived in two worlds, one
Yeah.
foot in the corporate world, one foot in education. And that combination really shapes everything that I do. So today that shows up in my life in about three interesting ways. Okay, so teaching obviously is one. I teach at Pepperdine. I have a community platform called SpeakerPost, which connects industry and classrooms. And then I have a magazine called Green Seashells, where I write all about wellness. And honestly, teaching has been so wonderful. I'm so grateful that get the opportunity to guide my students clearly about what they're walking into in terms of their lives and in their careers. Speaker Post really is about touching student lives, and then Green Seashells is really where I talk about well-being and how culture and community are so important in our everyday life. So for me, it's all about just doing the work that connects people and helps them move forward in their life with more confidence.
I love that. And you certainly had to be brave and have gained confidence through all the adventures you've taken in life, going from India to the US in your 20s. I really can't imagine. That's incredible. And then from, New York to LA. And when you said I moved to LA for more meaning in my work, and I kind of laughed because that's not the idea I think people have of LA. But of course, if you're teaching, that makes all the sense in the world. And I've had the pleasure of speaking to your class and also being engaged in speaker posts, which I find is phenomenal because I'm also very passionate about explaining to students how things work in the real world and how practice actually unfolds from the textbook to the workforce. And I love that bridge you have through Speaker Post that connects industry professionals like myself with classrooms from across the nation so that we can share our stories and we can share a little bit of inspiration and a little guidance when maybe normally we wouldn't have been able to connect with students in that way. And the students wouldn't be able to have that real life illustration of who actually works in this space and do I relate to them? Do I feel like that I might be of belonging like they are too?
Mhm.
And I appreciate those efforts that you make, like with Speaker Post, to connect students with industry pros. So, where did that passion come from? Because really, as a professor, that's a more than a full-time job. But tell us more about SpeakerPost.
Sure thing. Honestly, I'm an ideator. I just notice gaps in things.
Yes,
And then, once I see a gap, like I just can't unsee it.
right.
So for me, the gap in terms of speaker posts, the gap that I kept seeing was students are expected to make these big career decisions, but they don't really know how careers unfold in real life. Like, for example, they might know job titles, right? But they don't really know what a normal day in that job looks like. They don't actually know how people got those roles or how careers change along the way. So that was one part. And then on the other side, I saw professionals, right? They had years of experiences, they had mistakes, they pivoted, there were lessons learned, but none of that information really made it back into the classroom in an honest and, I would say, practical way. And so for me, there was this one other component, and that was so personal. See, I was an international student. So when I started out, there wasn't really anybody who could just walk alongside me, help me understand how an industry actually worked. There was no hand holding, no one translating for me what that career path would look like day to day. And for me, I had to learn by observing and just listening and just figuring stuff out as I went along. So honestly, Speaker Post came from wanting to build something that I didn't have, like a community that is built on trust, where educators and professionals they support each other. And the idea for me was just simple. If students can hear real stories earlier in life, then they don't have to figure out everything by themselves alone. And that's how Speaker Post came about.
And that's beautiful. And I love that you took action from an idea that popped up and that was bothering you. I put together a lot of passion projects in a similar way, Dr. K, that, I noticed a gap and I've realized early in my life, and I'm so thankful for that intuition, but it's that I can fill many of these gaps, right? Or I can find someone who can help. And I think that's what you're doing through Speaker Post. And we'll be sure to link Speaker Post in the show notes so that anybody listening to the podcast who's interested in sharing a little bit about their professional background and how they got into their career, what's it really like, or maybe even teach on a topic, try lecturing a little bit, has that opportunity because I think a lot of practicing professionals are very curious about the classroom, but that also, Dr. K, is a very intimidating space to walk into if you've never done it before. I taught as an adjunct professor for a little while, and I'm not sure what was scarier to me. Like, it felt like I was gearing up for a big professional workshop every Tuesday and Thursday. And part of what I think was tough for me is that since I am in practice and I'm in the field now, when I would read the textbook, even though it was brand new, okay, I would see chapters. I'm like, no, that's not how it works, or that's
Mhm,
not what's happening now.
mhm,
And so I almost double taught, where I would teach from the textbook and talk about that, and then talk about real world experiences and applications, just so that a student had a better understanding of what they might experience, like you said, if they actually followed my path, right? And started working in public relations or different aspects of marketing. So I love that you're doing that. And I give educators all the honor because I found it very, very nerve-wracking to put on that professor hat and feel like I was worthy of that. And then you go in there and you're teaching and I'm all passionate and geared up and the students are like womp womp. Looking at
Oh.
me and one thing I left them with, and whenever I talk to aspiring pros or definitely youth, like I'm going to have a talk tomorrow to some high schoolers, is I always find myself saying like, you know, if you showed a little enthusiasm, people would be so excited to work with you one day. So Just a little bit of passion and care will go a long way. So,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
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 And then you teach full time, you teach college students about public relations and aspects of communication. So, from your perspective, give us a sense of what students imagine this work is like and what students are like these days.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, most students don't know much about PR when they walk in. I mean, some of them probably loosely connected with marketing or like social media, which makes sense because that's all they know and that's all they see. But what surprises them really is, when we start talking about public relations as building trust and all about relationships, it's all about understanding people, how they think and what they value and how credibility is built over time. When we start talking about that, then, oh, then they're excited. And, I talk about culture quite a bit because I feel like that plays such a big role. The way we build trust is not always universal, right? I mean, the way people communicate, how they respond to different messages, or even how they build these relationships, professional relationships, is so different across regions and across community, right? So, because I studied culture and I mean, I'm an anthropologist by training, there is this concept in global business, and you probably know about it, Melissa, and it's called like glocalization, like global and local, and you connect those two words and becomes glocal. This is where a global brand, has to adapt to local markets, like to local behaviors, to local expectations.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating. And I mean, this doesn't have to happen across countries. Like it happens right here in the US. I mean, we're a salad bowl, right? We're not a single culture, we're a salad bowl. And what works in one region, in one community, or one audience doesn't necessarily translate somewhere else, right? And so I talk a lot about things like that. I don't have a textbook in my class. I mean, I use it for my own references, but I bring a lot of these industry, experiences that I had when I was on Madison Avenue. And we talk about this all the time. When organizations, ignore some of these differences, that's when, you have misunderstandings and your credibility drops and your reputation can take a hit. And so when I talk about things like that, that's when students realize what PR is all about.
Yeah, and then I love the really holistic way you paint the picture of the profession because it is really important. When I talk with students or aspiring pros, I often introduce an image of Jiminy Cricket, which in Disney's Pinocchio is like Pinocchio's conscience, right? And the idea of let your conscience be your guide is that mantra in the story, and it goes throughout. But I talk about being the conscious of an organization and that our real goal is to build a long-term win-win positive relationship between organizations and those that they should be serving. And I say it that way because it is, right, an act and it has to be consciously done. And those actions have to be continuous and consistent by organizations to keep the credibility and trust, as you mentioned. So I think that when students think of some of their natural gifts, I always want to tie PR to purpose because this can be such a purpose-driven path for them. And so I always get excited when I see some eyes light up with that idea. So I love that you're sharing that. And yes, absolutely. Textbooks, anything print can it's very hard to stop time and it's impossible. So I love that you have more of a dynamic approach to teaching about the industry and really your extra efforts to connect professionals with the classrooms is so valuable. And what kind of feedback do you get from the students about those experience? What kind of feedback do pros share with you after they've connected with the students?
I mean, I feel like bringing these guest speakers into my classroom and the fact that I've been able to create this platform, like I'm just, you know, that's the best part. I love it. I mean, from students, every time I bring in a guest speaker, I see hope. I see curiosity. I see possibility, right? And that's what I live for. I mean, some of these kids, the moment they realize, oh my God, there is this really cool career that I can pursue and it matches up with my skill set, their eyes sparkle, right? And I live for that moment. That's fantastic. From professionals too, I mean, I think it's reflective, I think, in a different way. I guess when they talk about their career story, they reconnect with what that journey was like, right? And they see how non-linear sometimes this journey was. And many of us, we're still evolving, right? I mean, we may be successful, but we're still learning and we're still growing. And so we think about that. It's a very satisfying experience talking with students. And when students hear these journeys, right, I feel like that's powerful too. Because I think most careers are not straight lines. Most people are still figuring it out. And students, it's powerful for students to hear that.
Yes, and I think it's powerful for the professionals, like you said, to have that opportunity to reconnect with how they got to where they are. I often will show a slide and it shows all my credentials and my experience. And I do that for credibility, right? Right up front. But then I always talk about, now that looks really nice and pretty on paper. And it looks like I have it all together, which I really try to work on every day, absolutely, as a human being. But my path, my career path did not start in a way that I even imagine I would do half the things I'm doing, right? And so having that approach and sharing the imperfect paths through is so inspiring for everyone. And I think when pros too even hear each other's story, because I know it keeps just coming up on this podcast for sure, is that the nonlinear path is normal.
We got to
It
normalize it. Absolutely.
absolutely, especially if you did not come from, family history of practicing prose in whatever profession you do. It is typically not a straight line forward. And so I love that you're honoring stories in that way because stories do inspire hope and possibility. And especially if they're relatable, and what's more relatable than that imperfect journey, that hero's journey is there's nothing like it. So I really love that both sides have that experience too, for sure. And I think when there's always been a lot of chatter in our industry of what's coming next and what should we plan for and what should we worry about, I think in some ways. And of course, there's a ton of talk about AI and what impact that's having on the profession, both good and bad. And then, of course, there's concerns about students really leaning on AI or asking chatbots for advice. And so I really want to dig into that a little bit with you, Dr. K. Are you seeing much of that using AI to generate the writing that is so key to this profession? Are you seeing them turn to chatbots for advice versus you? Or what does that look like in your world?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're definitely using AI.
Mm.
And I mean, I teach a writing class as well. And I see that. I see the use. But honestly, I feel like we underestimate our students when we talk about it like that because truth be told, right? Every generation has faced some version of like, will technology change how we work, how we live? Am I going to lose my job, right? So this generation is certainly dealing with that in real time with artificial intelligence. And so I know that they're using the tools. And I often grade their prompts actually instead of their writing because your writing is only as good as your prompt, right?
Mm.
But the truth is that these kids are also asking big questions, about their future. So I don't think I am that afraid that AI is going to replace how, what our profession does because, we teach our students to be focused on relationships, on reading people, on reading situations, planning things, and students understand that. We talk about creativity and ideation in the classroom, and we try to do that without AI, and students understand that. Um, so I think if anything, I feel like they're being thoughtful about their future in ways that I think we should respect.
Yes, and I really appreciate that you say that we shouldn't disrespect them and imagine that, oh, they're going to use this in the worst ways possible and not be able to think for themselves and write for themselves. And believe me, just to be very clear with everyone, I this is not an idea that I have against students or anyone else, right? It's so tempting to use any kind of tool to make anything easier, and for good reason. Like tools help people, right, do jobs better, personally and professionally. But I think when we're talking about AI, I like the approach that you have is, can you be creative without it? Because I would say, if nothing else in my career, what's really powered me forward is my critical thinking, of course, but my creative thinking. It's the problem solving aspect, the way I can work around or through a situation so quickly that I didn't have the advantage of some of these tools to lean on. But when you think about it, right? Once online became part of our everyday world, like I had tools there too, and using the search in ways that made sense, and then analyzing what comes up and pairing that with my human intuition and experiences, all of that matters. So I honor what you're saying there, and I love that you all are pushing them to be a little more holistic in their approach and using it as a tool versus as a substitute for what they can do for sure.
Yeah, because Melissa, if you really think about it, you and I, we have the baseline, right? We were trained without AI. So if we prompt, we have a baseline to begin with,
Right.
right? We know enough to begin that conversation or prompting. But these kids, they don't, right? So first we teach them that baseline. I mean, yeah, it helps with productivity. It's required for work for sure. But, I want to teach them that baseline so that when they prompt, that they are starting from already a place of knowing, right? Because AI is just easy to please. So that's really where, and it seeks to please, right? So
Right.
we're trying to teach them that baseline before they can do any of the other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I'm talking with my children, I'm often trying to get them to, like you're saying, think from scratch, right? Work from scratch and then add in the shortcuts as you need to. What about on, there is a lot of conversation about supporting and encouraging young people, especially so that they can become the aspiring pros of our next generation of workforce leaders. I love that you all are focused on relationships and reading the room, as you mentioned. Do we need to make extra efforts to help steer young people towards being brave and finding human mentors instead? Or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this generation, I mean, my daughter's part of this generation. She's 16. So
Right.
I think they're very clear on, what they want from life. And sometimes it gets misread, but I'm paying attention to this. I think a lot of my students, they're all thinking about quality of life, right? They want balance. They want to build a stable life, they want to buy a home, like they want financial security. They don't want like just work to define them, right? They care about ethics, they
Hmm.
care about fairness. This is what we are seeing from our young generation. And I think that they're craving human connection, actually. And I think it comes partly from the fact that this was that, you know, COVID generation, right? I mean, during their very early formative years, they had to deal with COVID. And I think it changed for them. I think it changed how they thought about communication and about relationships and what matters to them. And I don't think they're looking for just like job titles, right? They want to know what what will this career actually feel like? Will I be able to align my life with, what I really want to build here? So I think, yeah, I mean, they definitely need human mentors. I will tell you that every time I've brought in a professional into the classroom, whether it's in person or on Zoom, and this professional is honest with them, they love that. They're not looking for polished, they're looking for authenticity. And I think, oh, absolutely, they need human mentors, but we should give them more credit, the students, more credit for what they really want in life and what they're, and how they're going to get there in terms of their own career journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being able to offer them, even like you are doing with SpeakerPost, the opportunity to pop in and lecture or answer questions, like mentoring moments matter too, right? Just hearing about a profession or having that exposure to a professional that maybe is too busy to keep a more traditional, what we think of mentoring, right? Commitment going, but moments matter. And so I want to encourage everyone to share a little bit of mentoring just by sharing about your profession and your story, like you're saying, Dr. K. And honestly, I think that's what I've realized students really appreciate about me. Like sometimes I feel like I shock them a little bit. Well, I hope you let your class listen to this episode because the reality of what, of course, we see, right, on TV or we see about people sometimes isn't the truth. And I like to just pull back that curtain and be honest. And that's where my heart really was pushing me to write my own kind of textbook for aspiring pros, a smart talk book, because of that, wanting to make sure that all the how to's were there for someone in a way that was realistic and could give you a running start in the profession if you didn't have that mentor. Like, this is my way to scale mentoring. So that's another avenue too, is that if we as pros can tell our stories in different communication channels, lecturing in a class, being on a podcast like this, writing for blogs, writing a book, right? There's a lot of ways we can document and share those insights. So I want to encourage everyone to consider that because your story matters. It'll matter to the student. And same thing that I always learn a little bit about the students. And Dr. K, tell your students to be brave about if they do connect and they do resonate with someone's opinions or stories, and find them on LinkedIn and connect with them and follow them and ask about internships, ask about volunteering, ask a couple questions. I think that I'm always a little disappointed that sometimes I'll be in a room with hundreds of students and I'll ask if anyone's interested in, an internship, let me know, or questions, and I'll get a couple brave souls after a talk, but very few find me after on LinkedIn. And but those who do stand out, right? And so that's where I go back to a little enthusiasm and a little bravery will take you very far. So make that move, take that action for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Mhm.
you've told us a lot about students and perspective, but is there anything else you wish pros knew about the next generation of leaders that are coming through the classrooms?
I mean, honestly, well, I think students really, just value some kind of feedback, right? Some kind of authentic storytelling. And Melissa, your video, you and I recorded one a while ago, and I make them listen to it. It's required listening every semester. And you will likely see a few students reach out to you this semester, as they probably have last semester, just to say, we heard your video and it was great. So, yeah, I mean, I think people should do what you're doing, just finding opportunities to give back. And, I think students some of them are scared. They're intimidated. Most of
Sure.
them don't want to write their first post on LinkedIn. That's how scared they are. But there's like sponges. They're eager to learn. And, sometimes we push them. We definitely push them. And then when we get that kind of response from some of the professionals, some more encouragement, openness to just network with the child, be open to an informational, conversation. What do you do kind of thing?
Mhm.
I think it makes a big difference in the lives of the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I always love that. And so I remember speaking to a classroom. It was a private university, and it got to the open Q&A after I presented about the profession and overview of my story, and there was like no questions. And I just laughed and I said, you all are paying a lot of money to sit in this classroom today. And the idea is that you're majoring in this profession, you might want to work in it. Surely you have a question. Like, you're literally paying for this moment. Like, what are your questions? And really just kind of pushing them, like you said, and encouraging them. Like, get used to speaking up. If you're going to be in public relations, it is going to be part of your job to say the hard thing, to ask the tough question, to ask the insightful question, and do it in front of your peers so everyone can learn from it. So
Yeah,
I,
and honest, Melissa, I think some kids just have it, right? Like someone like my
Mhm.
daughter, for example, she can just talk, and she doesn't think, like she's comfortable just sharing. And then there are some that are not. I remember having a student who was just so quiet the whole time. I was just like, I don't even know. I mean, is this kid going to do anything with his life, right? I mean, literally worried for him. And, in a few years of like going out there and like, he decided to do celebrity PR and he had to work
Wow.
really hard, but he learned so much. And now he comes to my class and he talks about his experiences. So, what a huge, like, change
Yeah.
from who he was a few years ago. I mean, these kids are learning, they're growing, but they're absorbing. They're like sponges. And so if someone doesn't ask you questions, don't feel bad about it. They're all taking it in, and whatever you've done is going to touch them. And that you have to believe that because I do. I've seen that happen and the success stories, after people come into the classroom and share their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been on both sides. My son is like that. He just takes information in. And I've had a teacher tell me one time, like, "Oh, we don't worry about Logan." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, he may be looking the other way or fiddling with this or that, but he gets the answers right, and you ask him a question to check in, and he's on it. It's just his way of processing." And my work and my parenting has taught me to tailor how I approach communication very much. What I expect in terms of nonverbals from students, like you're saying, Dr. K, I try to be very open about that, but also prompt them that sometimes you have to make a conscious effort to override your natural system
Hmm.
so that you can leverage an opportunity, right? Like when I taught, and I would bring professionals from different parts of communication into the classroom, I would tell them like, this is your chance to talk to a journalist. This is your chance to talk to this kind of pro. Like have questions, plan them out. And so for some students, it helped them to have that opportunity to think ahead of time so that they could plan out questions because they weren't quick at the improv thinking on the fly, right? Coming up, like you said, like your daughter's comfortable speaking really on the fly. But for others, they need a little time to think through an experience or an opportunity. So I love that you bring that up because you don't know. You don't know what people are observing. There's a professional now named Virginia who told me years after I'd spoken to a classroom, she circled back in LinkedIn and she said, "Hi, my name's Virginia. I am a master's student pursuing, this degree now, and I'm working on this project, and I would love to interview you about this because you spoke to my classroom in a community college years ago, and you talked about public relations, and you talked about this campaign, and it resonated with me. So now I'm focused on this part of my master's degree because of that." And so I had no idea I had that influence on that student. I don't even remember connecting with Virginia after. And she came back to me years later to let me know what I had to say that day, which I think that was a very stressful day. Wasn't getting a lot of love back from the classroom. I felt like I was almost bothering them, right? And it was an in-person experience, so that it's like a comedian being on stage, and you're like, okay, are you
But that's so
laughing?
special. Isn't that special when like that feeling of somebody reaching out to you, like, oh my God, I touched this child's life? It just
Life's
that's
purpose. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, nothing more satisfying. I mean, you want to find purpose. And I find myself after, something really hit after that second decade of work where I want to give back and be that trailblazer and make it smoother and okay, let me share all the hacks so you can just jump right over the obstacles I ran into. And
Exactly.
so yeah, no, absolutely. There's nothing better like that. So you don't know, to your point, whose lives you're touching even if maybe you don't get that immediate feedback.
Yeah.
But if you're a student listening, just like Dr. K said, we understand that you want feedback and you crave it. And I will tell you, anyone who's spending time to speak and work with you all would love that feedback too. If
Yeah.
you,
Yeah, and SpeakerPost is a great way,
yes,
just get on the site, just find ways to connect with people and more importantly, like just be willing to like just share your journeys, your ups and downs, your successes and your failures with students and sharing what you wish you knew, when you were in college. Like those conversations are so powerful. So one must try just get put yourself out there a little bit and
yep.
and hold a child's hand and help them through this journey. They'll thank you for their entire lives, and then, you'd also feel so good inside.
Yes, and you don't know that they might be the next client that hires, your firm. They may
Mhm.
be the next boss that hires you for something. I mean, it's a small world in a lot of different ways. So, especially if they're a rising star, that connection can be beneficial all the way around. Dr. K, I want you to tell us a little bit more about SpeakerPost. What exactly is it, and how do we get involved?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, well, thank you for asking. So, SpeakerPost, it's speakerpost.com. It's like a social media platform. It feels like a little bit like LinkedIn. So, you go in there, you create your account. It's free, and you talk about a little bit about yourself. So, like, write a little tiny bio about who you are, and that's it. You're signed up. And let's say you're an educator, or you are someone just in general looking for a guest speaker. There is a tab which you click on, and it opens up this form, and you complete some basic information on this is what I'm looking for. I want someone to speak to my class about event management, for example. And you put in this is the time, this is the place. It could be online, it could be in person. This is the stuff you could talk about. And then you hit publish, and your post is up and running. And then it goes to everybody in the community. And if there's someone in that community willing to help you, they will just apply. And that's it. There's an internal messaging system on the platform. You can talk with each other and then find out a time and place, and to maybe speak in person or on the phone, and then make that engagement happen. Now, the goal here is to always keep these kinds of academic conversations free, because access matters, and there are students who are in universities that don't have the kind of budget, community colleges that don't have the kind of budget, and it's not the student's fault. And most educators, I have noticed, never say no to going out there and getting on that platform and finding their industry person, because everybody on that platform is willing to help. It's not like LinkedIn, there's no cold calling, right? This is a community that wants to share, that wants to give back. And I have yet to meet an industry person who says, I'm not going to be available to help your students out. Never. And so, and nobody wants money for some of this stuff because it's not their main source of income. It's just something that they do to feed the soul, really. And so that's the idea. So you don't need to have a big commitment. You could be a member on that platform and not do anything for the whole year, or you could be a member on the platform and just reach out directly and say, I want to help somebody who needs me. And so that's this is a community that we've built on trust. It's growing. We've had connections across the seas and done amazing things across seas, and in different schools all over the world, and touch thousands of lives. So it's a great platform, if you're looking for a way to give back, or if you're looking for a guest speaker for your classroom, come join us. We would love to have you.
Yes, I love that purposeful matchmaking you're doing there. And like you said, access does matter. And in our virtual world today, we can pop in, like you said, from sea to shining sea. So I think it's fantastic. And I encourage everyone to check it out. So, Dr. K, I mean, I've just really enjoyed knowing you really for the time that we've been connected through our mutual passions and our efforts to elevate and expand the profession. And I want to kind of end with two questions I ask all my guests. First, what does smart talk mean to you?
Okay, smart talk. Well, it means having a conversation that is useful, it is thoughtful, and it's timely. Something that
Mm.
helps you move forward with clarity, just the way a guest speaker would, right? I think for me, it's just all the same stuff. And Melissa, obviously, you have your book, and it's called A Talk. And of course, I've read it cover to cover multiple times. I take it in my classroom, talk to my students about it. I let them borrow it. I think it's a book that doesn't overcomplicate, right?
Yeah.
And that's what smart talk is, right? It helps you think clearly, make better decisions, and That's what any good professional advice, whether it's in a book or if it's as a guest speaking opportunity, that's what a good professional conversation should do, right? Help people move forward with some level of perspective and also confidence
And like you said, Dr. K, hope. I
and
love that.
hope. Yes, and hope. Absolutely.
Well, wonderful. This is just very encouraging, delightful conversation. And I'm sure many pros want to reach out to you. So, what's the best way for listeners to connect with Dr. K?
Well, LinkedIn is one of the best ways, obviously, and I'm very active on LinkedIn because I'm mostly sharing internships and
Mhm.
opportunities because I have so many students that follow me, and so and early career professionals that follow me. So yeah, I mean that's LinkedIn is a great way. Introduce yourself to me and tell me what you want. And here I am to help you. Speakerpost.com. Again, that's a great way. If you're already looking to give back, just create an account. You should find my own profile on that platform. And there's a contact us button. So maybe, and I'm the only one here. It's just me, so it'll come straight to me if you reach out. And if you're more into wellness and well being and looking for some meaning in life, then Green Seashells is a great way to get in touch with me. So just go to Green Seashells, like seashells on the beach, greenseashells.com, and you'll find me there as well.
Sounds wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kay, for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks to our listeners for joining me for today's episode. We love covering communication topics that elevate our industry practice. If you'd like to go deeper, you can work with me as a coach, trainer, consultant, or hire my firm, MVW Communications, for strategic communication and public relations services. My industry books, Smart Talk Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know, and Latinas in Public Relations, Shaping Communications, Communities, and Culture, are also available for purchase on Amazon. Grab your copy there and please leave us a supportive review. Book reviews and podcast reviews help more aspiring or hardworking pros find our resources. As always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.